it's a positive that you're still in the hunt for sure. It does, make planning a little more hard when you're trying to have one eye on the future. But I think in this case, you owe it to your fans and everybody involved to try to do the best you can this year to make a run. This kid has exceeded my expectations. He has, and really, it's taught me a little bit about scouting in that you can't say that a guy can't develop. You just got to give him an opportunity too. And he's gotten better he's better, was way better at Oklahoma than he was at Alabama. He's way better in year 2 than I thought he was last year.
Tuning in on this Friday edition of Birds 365 with Mac and Mac, John McMullen, Jody McDonald. We're going to take a couple minutes, different look at what's going on in the National Football League. John and I have both been covering the league for years. We haven't been inside it. Our next guest has former NFL executive jumping aboard with us. He's been on with us previously and always gives us a different look at what's going on in the National Football League. Randy Mueller joins us here on Birds 365. How you been, Randy?
Doing great, guys. Thanks for having me back. Happy holidays to you.
Happy holidays to you. Thanks for getting up this early with us as well, Randy. Really appreciate it. I do want to dive in. I want to get your thoughts on just how difficult it is. I think it's easy when you're a Super Bowl contender and everybody knows you're a contender. As you're a GM and you have your head coach, everybody's on the same page. Everybody's got that same goal. You want to go for the championship. Here in Philadelphia, Jeffrey Lurie has called it a transition phase. They have a young quarterback they want to learn about, and all of a sudden they're in the playoff picture. And there's 4 weeks to go for them, 4 games to go. And, you have Gardner Minshew. He comes in, he plays well against a poor opponent. How do you handle that GM head coach sort of disconnect? Nick Sirianni wants to win every week, do everything possible to win. You want to evaluate a young quarterback. How is that sort of handled, Randy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's all about mindset, right? And that's what you mean. I think as certain teams wind down their season, they're looking for answers and gathering as much information to go into 222 as possible. Other teams, like you say, are managing their team with the idea of, hey, we got a playoff run to make. So I think you're right. The Eagles are kind of somewhere in between. It is a tough dynamic per se. I'm sure Howie and Nick have these conversations daily. I do think it's important that their relationship kind of withstands all of the different agendas per se. And it's a positive that you're still in the hunt for sure. It does, make planning a little more hard when you're trying to have one eye on the future. But I think in this case, you owe it to your fans and everybody involved to try to do the best you can this year to make a run. I think it's one thing to plan ahead as a GM, and you like the GM to have a picture of from 30,000 feet, but you can't forget about the worm's eye view of the guys in that locker room and everybody fighting week in and week out. I always think that led me to the right thing to do. I wanted to be judged by the guys downstairs in the locker room, and they're all about winning right now. So I think you have to give way to your long-term plans to kind of focus on what they want to do. And we know that is to win games week in and week out. So I do think that takes precedent.
Randy, one of the reasons why I appreciate the job you used to do as a general manager in the league, and I've always had an appreciation for it because my father did it in professional baseball. And he used to, I don't want to say whine, but complain about it. The most important part of the season on the field is the part of the year that you probably have the least impact. That from the day the season ends, you can restructure the roster, the entire offseason. Right. And then heading into camp, certainly you're going to have a big impact on it. And leading up to the trade deadline, you can make a key acquisition. And then you get to the end of the season, which is the most important on the field, and you're moving pawns around on the practice squad. How do you deal with that? That you know that you've done an outstanding job putting your team in the best position to win, and then you're told, now you stand back and just watch. For the most part, there's still some moves to be made. I want to say like you go in the corner by yourself, but you're hands-on impact isn't as strong at the end of the season as it is for the rest of the year. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think you have to understand your place in the hierarchy, that's for sure. And your job really kicks in when the season ends. But having said that, Jody, there's a million things you can do to help your team right now. And sometimes it's about being a sounding board for your coach and for your coaches, for your players. Somebody inside the building has to help with the glue of kind of keeping everybody focused on the same direction. I always think that sometimes the role of a general manager gets pigeonholed into, hey, you go sit in this room and look at film and pick players. It's really not that. That's a little bit of it, but you've got to manage everybody in that building per se and try to do everything you can to help the coach and the coaching staff. Maybe it's an extra film or two on the opponents. Maybe it's doing some advanced scouting that helps you win one game. But there's a lot of things where you can focus your time and efforts to help that team per se. Yeah, you can't make roster moves, so to speak, at the end of a season, but you can surely help others feel good about their jobs. And sometimes I used to spend an inordinate amount of time in the trainer's room during the end of seasons to kind of get the medical layout and the lay of the land and try to help make those decisions that are best for us going forward. And so sometimes it's we know we're all beat up, right? And really your job is to give information to those coaches at this point and try to help them any way you can. So yeah, you maybe set your ego aside, but if you're in this business because of your ego, you need to check that and probably are in the wrong business. I think I always said and accepted this. And in fact, some of the great GMs that I grew up with always said this. I know Bill Polian is one who I kind of learned this from. During the season, it's the coach's job. He's the face of your franchise. You got to do everything you can to support him. In the offseason will be your time. You can rebuild the team. You can retool the team. Just because you are sitting in the seat now as you prepare for a playoff run doesn't mean you can't look at tape on college guys and kind of make your plans behind the scenes for next year. You just don't have to share that with anybody so that takes the agenda.
Yeah, Randy, bring something interesting up from a medical standpoint. And I wanted to run this by you because of Dalvin Cook yesterday. And you started in this league in the, I think, the early 80s. So how much have things changed? Dalvin is, and I can say this because I like Joe Banner and Joe's on Twitter and Joe said it publicly. So Joe said he shouldn't have been in that game. And if he wasn't in that game, the Vikings aren't going to win that game. Let's be honest. And he's hurt. He's a great player. How much has the thought process changed from an executive standpoint from you started to now? It seems to me from the outside looking in, everybody always has that goal of winning a championship, but football players play. If they're healthy, they play. Can you worry about shelf life and say, well, we're not that good, so we're not going to play our best players if they're not 100%? How much has that changed, or has it changed over the years?
Well, I think it's changed somewhat, but it's still right and wrong to do the same thing. And I do think money has changed it. Money's changed, where these players are really investing in themselves. They're interested in longevity, and I totally get that. I think that from that standpoint, your mind has to change because these are big valued pieces. And I hate to refer to players as assets or valued pieces because that's not what they are. I don't know if I'd agree with Joe in last night's game. I thought, Cook, if he's going to play, it's up to him. If he wants to play, surely. I think if they had felt that he would injure himself worse, they would have protected him against himself. I think the competitive spirit in him, and I would love to see that. Guys want to play, but that's not for everybody, right? And obviously it depends on the injury themselves. But I think in this day and age, I think you have to err on the side of player safety, and I think that's become more of an issue. So that has changed the game. I don't think you can roll guys out there like we did in the 80s, with hay bale wire and Band-Aids and just expect them to give, 100% and use them up. I don't think that can be the case at all. So I do think there is a little more of a mindset on week 16, week 17. But I think you also take care of players during the week from that standpoint as well, where you don't work them, you don't practice it hard. The physicality of these long seasons does take some wear and tear. So, it's a fine line. I like the idea that he played. I think he gained a lot of street cred in his own building if he needed any. But I do think that shows a lot that the Vikings are all in still, even though they were 5-7 going into that game. So I give him kudos for playing for sure. And I'm not here to judge if he should play or not play. That's up to him.
If you're enjoying Randy here with us, make sure you check out his website, MuellerFootball.com, and his GM podcast as well. Randy, I want your take on the quarterback position in general. John asked you a little earlier about what you do. You got a guy you're trying to analyze, make a decision on going forward, and then your backup comes in and plays as well as he does. Well, you got an in-the-moment decision, but you also have a larger picture decision. Jalen Hurts has given the Eagles an extra weapon this year. This side of Lamar Jackson, he's the best running quarterback in the National Football League, as far as I'm concerned. That's a nice plus to have, but you don't know if his accuracy, his arm accuracy, is going to be enough to merit him being the quarterback for years to come. Where is the quarterback position right now in the National Football League? I think everyone loves the athletic quarterback who can make plays outside the pocket, can turn it upfield. But Jalen is a little bit even further down the line than some of those. Is that the prototypic quarterback that they're looking coming out of college these days? A guy who can make a play with his legs? Is it not? Is it this year's group seems like a more pocket-based quarterback? Where is the quarterback position in the National Football League in your mind right now?
I'll be honest with you. I don't think it's changed a whole lot. I know this. And if you go back and look at the start of the season where some of the experts had these college kids going into this year, I was fascinated by, and I don't want to pick on Mel, but his board and a couple other people's board where it had 3 or 4 quarterbacks way up there. I can tell you this, the criteria hasn't really changed. The move, the ability to get away from a rush, the ability to extend plays is a bonus for sure. But I don't think people are looking for that. I really don't. I think people are looking for guys who can beat you from the pocket because defensive coaches are really good. They find ways to make you stay in the pocket, and eventually you have to become a passer, like you're finding out with Jalen Hurts. You've got to become a passer in the pocket if you're going to succeed for long term. Now, you may have some flashes and some spots where you can exceed, but I think in this day and age, especially, and again, I think this year's quarterback draft out of college is going to be fascinating because I see one guy, and that's Kenny Pickett. Let's start with the criteria of what you're looking for as a club. And as a franchise quarterback, you're looking for 6'3" plus. You're looking for guys that can make all the throws from the pocket, who have touch, who have tendencies that can throw guys open. The instincts that come with it. You're not, and this is not a slight on anybody. You're not looking for 6 foot tall guys that can run around. You're really not. You end up falling back on that when you can't find the 6'4" guys who can stand in there and make all the throws. That's why I think these other types of players have become fascinating is that they're getting more opportunities because there's not a bunch of 6'3", 6'4" guys running around out there. You can count on one hand how many of those guys are really good, and that's why they get $40 million a year. So I think the criteria has changed maybe some for the media who kind of, I guess we're all in that boat to an extent, prop up these lesser talented physical passers because that's the best there is. That's the best option some of these teams have. I don't think they want to go that route. I think if you gave Jim Harbaugh truth serum in Baltimore, they probably wouldn't want the style of quarterback that Lamar is. They would prefer a 6'3", 6'4", in the pocket passer, but that's the best they have. So they've got to adapt. So it's a lot of weeds to wade into. I don't want to be too long-winded, but I think it all starts with the criteria of what you're looking for at the quarterback position. And I'll say this about Jalen Hurts, and I know you guys know a lot more about it than I do. This kid has exceeded my expectations. He has, and really it's taught me a little bit about scouting in that you can't say that a guy can't develop. You just got to give him an opportunity to, and he's gotten better was way better at Oklahoma than he was at Alabama. He's way better in year 2 than I thought he was last year. So what's to say he has a ceiling? I haven't seen anything keep him from getting better week in and week out. I thought early in the season they needed to develop their drop back passing game more. I didn't think they really gave Jalen a chance. Guess what?
Yeah.
They did that, and that's improved. So sorry to be so long-winded, but I'm a little passionate about quarterbacks.
No, yeah,
that's exactly what I wanted.
And yeah, to kind of piggyback off that, Randy, from a coaching perspective, because I think you're right. If you if you gave John Harbaugh sodium pentothal, I think you're right. And I don't even have to think with Nick Sirianni. He's very honest. He wants to play 11 personnel. He wants to throw the football down the field. That's where he eventually wants to get.
Right.
So from a GM's perspective, how important is it to get a coach, and has it changed, who will have that DNA? That's fine. You want to get to that point, but understand if you're not at that point, to best take advantage of the talent you currently have.
That's coaching, right? That's coaching 101, not only at quarterback position, but everywhere else. You'd like to have an ideal team that you build on paper that this is exactly what we want and fits our criteria perfectly. We know that's not possible. That's not real. You've got to deal. You've got to move. You've got to be able to find alternatives to develop players in different ways. And I think, again, you guys know more than I do, but I think Nick's done a pretty good job of that. He's willing to adjust. I don't think he's a guy that, sits inside a box and says, this is the way we're going to do it. I thought him and Shane have done a pretty good job overall dealing with their quarterbacks and the hand they've been dealt. So, time will tell. I think that at every position, really, and as a team builder, that's what you're looking for. You've got to find, you have your criteria, but you've got to adjust your schemes to fit what you have especially once your season starts and you know what your roster is going to look like. I think that's the part of coaching that fascinates me. Is it's about, taking your guys and taking my guys and seeing who can make the best group going forward, do what we want to do, and then do it good.
Randy, the Eagles have 4 games left, all of them against teams within their division. The Washington football team has 5 games left because they have already had their bye. All of them against teams in their division. This is all going to be decided in the last 4 or 5 weeks. The 2 teams are right next to each other in playoff possibilities. Washington's in. The Eagles are just out. We'll see how it all shakes out. Did the NFL do the right thing by scheduling the season the way they have? I mean, not just a couple of, the entire last quarter of the season is divisional matchups. Is that the best thing for the football fan out there?
Well, I love it. Whether it's the best for the football fan, I don't know. Maybe they want to see some more marquee matchups, but I think if we're going to determine division champs and who's the best within divisions, the only way to do it is to play each other, right? I mean, you're seeing it in the AFC East with Buffalo and New England playing 2 of the last 3 weeks. That's going to be a fascinating matchup. We're seeing it now with Dallas and Washington playing each other a couple times down the stretch here. I love it. I just think there are no secrets in division matchups. You guys know, I mean, these teams play each other so much. It's all about adjustments and figuring out what we didn't do good last time. I like it. I think it's great. I think the rivalries mean something more so than the bright light games. We're going to see the bright light games in the playoffs soon enough. But I think if we're going to determine, this is the best way to determine who's the best, is to let them fight it out within the division.
Well, speaking of those division games, Randy, I'm sure you saw New England, Buffalo. Buffalo probably saw something they weren't expecting from a division rival. What is it about Bill Belichick? Obviously, he's got the longest rope humanly possible for a head coach, so he can do some things that other coaches can't do. But what is it about him that, from my perspective, I'll say it this way: he looks like he's confident in his teaching ability and is willing to try different things each and every week that other coaches are not willing to do. Would you agree with that sentiment?
I agree. And again, I think your first comment was right on in that he has a lot of rope because of the success he's had. He's very productive. I mean, he can be, his history shows he's been productive. So he gets a lot of swings, right? He doesn't get 3 swings at the plate. He might get 4 or 5 strikes before he strikes out. So yeah, I think what for me, what doesn't get enough run is the old adage, Herm Edwards, that he plays to win the game. And that's what Belichick does. He plays to win the game, no matter what it takes. I also think his schemes and the way he coaches, his style, he builds his teams knowing that we may not be good in the first quarter of the season. eventually they're going to get it if we have the right football IQ on this team. He's always had really high football IQ players and built his team that way. And they play better in the end because they finally get it. And you don't have a lot of ups and downs for them in the second half of the season. So, I mean, I think he's the best at that. He adapts week in and week out better than anybody, whether it's taking away something that is the strength of the opposition. That's all part of coaching. And I love seeing it. I think he does have an ability to figure things out on the fly. And like you said, throw caution to the wind because, hey, I'm Bill Belichick. I can try anything and make sense of it at the end of the day. But I really don't think he cares what we think. And that's a
powerful.
It's a quality that not many get in this league. And he's put himself there, and kudos to him.
All right. John went Belichick on you. So I'm going to go to the other half of the since departed daring duo. You were in the league at the time. How many times over the years have you gone back to the scouting report coming out of Michigan that you had on Tom Brady and said, yeah, how'd I miss this? Look, he did talk about that, and maybe I should have put more emphasis. And it could have been me who drafted Tom Brady.
Right.
How many times have you done that over the years?
Well, it's a lesson in scouting for sure. I mean, all of us should really critique what we saw there. And I've seen it time and time again, not to that level of a player becoming what Tom Brady has become, but intangibles matter. Football IQ matters. A lot of things that are hard to evaluate in a scouting report are what has made Tom Brady the best. I remember I had a little stint in my career where I worked at ESPN for about 3 years. And part of my gig was the thing I enjoyed most. And this is after 20, 25 years in the league. I didn't really ever get to see how other teams did it. In other words, how they structured training camp, how they practiced. And so my time at ESPN, I went around and got to go to some training camps. And one of the first ones I chose is I wanted to go to New England, right? I wanted to see the magic sauce. I wanted to figure out what was going on there. And my day there watching them practice was unbelievable, the things that I was able to learn. I know this, Tom Brady had made 2 or 3 Super Bowls at that time and Pro Bowls, but I saw a guy that worked on little detailed fundamentals, even, and I consider him having already made it. He didn't ever detour from that. It's almost a mindset of I'm not going to let these little things go. His fundamental work during practice after making so many Pro Bowls told me this guy gets it, and he continued to improve. That same practice, I remember Bill Belichick having everybody run a lap because somebody jumped off sides. I mean, I learned a ton. I said, they can't make people run laps in the NFL. That's crazy. What is this, junior high? And it worked. The next thing I know, coaches are running laps. So, hey, each to his own. The thing that they've been able to do is focus and to get better at whether you're an individual player or a team. It's that mindset of putting blinders on, being willing to work in the dark without anybody shining light on you or giving you attention. And that's what these greats of the game do. They're not afraid to work in the dark. And I don't think we were wrong on Tom Brady's scouting report. I just think he's surpassed it. At the time, we saw what we saw. We wrote what we saw. He's gotten so much better since then. He's the one that should be credited for it. And maybe it's the chip on his shoulder of when he got drafted that have helped him along. But intrinsically, he's wired different. And so it wouldn't have mattered when he got picked. He was just willing to pay the piper year in and year out, day in and day out. And that's a lesson in scouting. It's hard to read what's inside a guy's mind and heart.
Yeah, that brings up, one of my pet peeves, Randy, is people assume you draft a player and you get a good player or a bad player, and they forget the player development aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it comes after you hand in that card, never mind for a 6th-round pick, but even a 1st-round pick.
Yep.
And how the coaches develop and how the coaches teach. I don't know how much you watch Jordan Mailata, the Eagles left tackle, but obviously he comes in as a 7th-round pick who never played the game at an organized level before. We're standing here 4 years later. I would argue, other than Trent Williams, who's on a different level, he's in the conversation for being the best left tackle in football. Didn't know. I saw him first day of practice, didn't know how to put a football helmet on.
Right.
Had to be told how to put. Obviously has tremendous physical gifts. But player development, why do so many people forget about that part of it? Because it's such a huge part of this industry.
Well, it doesn't make the headlines. It doesn't, it's not you can't give a hot take on player development. So it gets kind of pushed to the side by most of us, by fans, by media, by everybody. But anybody inside of a building knows exactly what that's all about. And you make up a great point. I mean, he's obviously a physically gifted kid. He's big, strong. And I have had a chance to watch some tape on him. There's still some instinctive things that come a little slow for him at times. You wish he'd see things different. But he's so gifted that he can make up for that in that when he hits people, they go back. And there's no denying that that's what he does. And that's, that's the first thing that's hard to find. But I look at this guy as being able to, he could be the best to take it out further and extrapolate on it. Once he figures things out, because I'm with you, I don't think he has it all figured out yet. But I see enough to where I think this kid's getting better. I always equate it to this. Did he get to play Nerf football out in the yard growing up as a kid? Because that's where we all developed instincts for the game, right? Playing in the yard, playing around it. He probably didn't. So it's going to take him a little longer to figure out, angles. And there are instincts involved in playing left tackle. Trust me, it's just not all big brute physical strength. So I think he's a fun guy to watch. And you're probably not wrong. There's not many better than him. And you would surely bet on him like the Eagles did as an investment type for the future. And I think it's a smart thing how he did by locking him up early.
Randy, I need your take on this because I know you're a Pacific Northwest guy. John and I have discussed this both on the air and off the air. Seattle Seahawks got a big win last week, so they're still on the outskirts of the playoff. They're not dead yet. If they had lost last week, they might just have packed it in for the last 4 games. But they got a win, and Russell Wilson looked more like Russell Wilson, and that's why we're entrenching this, because Russell Wilson may become a big topic of conversation in this town when the season's over and done with. People suggesting, when I say people, I mean media members, some big names, some small name, that maybe this is it for Pete Carroll, that Pete Carroll, well into his 70s, may either walk away or be told to walk away or have pushed to walk away with Seattle. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying that Pete Carroll's ready to walk away. I still think that Pete Carroll might want to stick around and undertake a rebuilding if the Seahawks were to move Russell Wilson. Your sources tell you if the Seahawks don't make the playoffs, if they're open-minded about trading Russell Wilson, will they, and will Pete Carroll stick around if that's the case?
Well, it's a fascinating topic. As you can imagine, I live in Seattle, so I hear it daily. And actually, I watch a lot of tape during the week, so I've tried to dive into it. It's a convoluted equation to solve. I do think that they have some hard questions to ask. I don't think they're a playoff team. I know they got a win last week, and they'll probably get another one. They play Houston this week. So they're going to get people talking about them on the fringe of the playoffs. But I don't think this is the case of one bad season. I think it's the culmination of 3 or 4 years of bad decisions that just haven't worked out for whatever reason, resulting in where they're at this year. So from that standpoint, Pete does make the decisions. John Snyder technically works for him. I would love to, if I were in charge, and obviously I'm not, but Jody Allen, Burt Cole, the powers that be in Seattle are going to have to ask these hard questions. I would definitely want Pete going forward as part of my fix. I might consider reversing the roles, and they've kind of done that contractually. Pete is signed through 25. John is signed through 27. So maybe Pete can be part of the fix, but I think the short-term decision-making philosophy that sometimes comes with a coach being in charge, and it definitely has come in Seattle with Pete being in charge, that role kind of needs to be bypassed a little bit. I think they need to make some decisions based on longer term. And if Pete wants to be a part of that, I would surely welcome that. I just don't know that you could have, a 70-year-old coach, and I understand his production and what he's done to deserve this spot. I just don't know if you could have him make those decisions if, they've tried to Band-Aid it together with hay bale wire and everything else, and it just hasn't worked. So I think you need to have a little longer term plan when retooling this group, because it's not a good group. They're not talented. There's been a disconnect with what the criteria is that they want to use to acquire players and their schemes. Really, they've built a team that's, used parts, and it doesn't fit right now. So they've got to have a little longer term view and goal. And I think they can do that, but it's going to take some, really, whether Russell Wilson's a part of it, I don't know. He has a no trade clause, so he's going to have a lot of say in that. but you're talking about a 33-year-old quarterback who's had some ups and downs really since midseason a year ago. So it's probably a long show for us, a complete podcast, so to speak, to dissect all the issues there. But you've hit on something that Northwesterners are talking about every day. And I think it's complicated. If that's an answer in one word, it's complicated.
Last one from me, Randy, and thanks again, MuellerFootball.com. You can check out Randy there. He's got his GM pod with the Athletic, former executive of the year of the NFL. You mentioned people are talking about it every day in Seattle. What's going to happen? I'm just curious because we're in Philadelphia. We know Doug Peterson well. He's from Bellingham in Washington. How much do people bring up the name Doug Peterson out there when they speculate about the future?
I don't think they've done that yet. I don't think that dot is connected. I don't think anybody's really believing that Pete would not be the coach or make that many changes. They just hired an offensive coordinator this year, and Russell was involved in that. So, I don't think anybody's sweeping that decision out the door yet. So I would say Doug Peterson hasn't got a lot of traction out here per se, because I just don't think people are that far down the road in change. Obviously, that would be a great discussion for another time, probably, whether Doug fits in at some level with what they're doing. I just don't think people are ready for that yet right now. And so it's not on the front burner, I'll say that.
Randy, we are certainly going to get you back on before the playoffs or right as the playoffs roll around, because you've got a ton of experience in that. We're hoping the Eagles are in the playoffs so we can talk about it. But if not, we're going to have you on either way. Thank you very much for getting up early and joining us today. We'll talk to you again very soon.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks a lot.
Randy Mueller, ex-executive of the year, as John pointed out. Check out his website, MuellerFootball.com, and his podcast with The Athletic. All right, John McMullen, Jordan McDonald. We still got 10 minutes left. Damn, yeah, we'll make the most of it. A football front. Picks coming. Oh, shoot. We'll come back.
We'll pick Washington, Dallas. How about that?
There you go. So challenged, so answered. We'll come back, put the bow on the show here on Birds 3.